Walk into your local takeaway or butcher's. Things may not be quite as clean as you'd like, but the food hygiene rating sticker is supposed to reassure you the food here is safe. So can you really trust the numbers on the doors?
Yeah, clean, 5 star.
5 star.
5 star. If you've ever wondered what a food inspection looks like, this is it. We're out with the Ealing Food Safety team, checking out a number of restaurants and takeaways.
Potentially be evidence of some test droppings, having a closer look with the torch.
British consumers withdrew an estimated £2 billion from restaurant chains last year. Not because of the cost of living, not because they stopped eating out, because they found out what was happening behind the counter and they made a choice. One brand collapsed from a $2 billion valuation to nothing. One had its own workers arrested in a sting. One is facing 700 legal claims and counting, and its CEO has been summoned to Parliament twice to explain himself. These are the 8 British brands that customers decided they had had enough of and voted with their feet. 1. BrewDog. Cast your mind back to 2010. A small Scottish brewery, 2 founders in their 20s, canning their own beer and selling it from a van at a market in Fraserburgh. The punk attitude was real. The mission, to make people as passionate about craft beer as they were, felt genuine. BrewDog was the underdog that told the big brewers where to go, and a generation of drinkers loved them for it. Then the money came in. And then the open letters started. In 2021, 61 former employees, using the name Punks with Purpose, published a letter that went viral overnight. They described a culture of fear, staff treated like objects, a toxic workplace where growth was the only priority and basic human decency was optional. A BBC documentary followed, exposing a pattern of bullying and exploitation that bore no resemblance to the values on the brewery wall. Co-founder James Watt issued apologies, internal reviews were launched. But customers who had bought into the brand, who had invested quite literally through the Equity for Punks crowdfunding scheme, began asking a harder question. If the workplace culture is the opposite of what you told us, what else is? The answer came in financial statements. BrewDog posted losses for 5 consecutive years. By 2024, cumulative losses had reached 148 million. In January 2026, they closed their distillery. In March 2026, the company entered administration. 38 bars closed immediately. 484 jobs were lost. The 220,000 people who had invested in Equity for Punks received nothing. Their stakes were wiped out. The brand was sold to American company Tilray for $33 million, a company once valued at close to $2 billion. One former employee described being made redundant on a 15-minute Teams call. The Punk IPA is still being brewed, just not for the people who built it. 2. McDonald's. Here is a number. 700. That is how many current and former McDonald's employees in the UK have now taken legal action against the chain. Not a single incident. Not a rogue manager at one branch. 700 people at locations across the country who say the company failed to protect them. The BBC first reported on working conditions at McDonald's UK in July 2023, a 5-month investigation that spoke to more than 100 current and former staff. Workers as young as 17 described being routinely groped, harassed and bullied by managers. 31 of the allegations related to sexual assault. 78 to sexual harassment. There were also 18 allegations of racism. McDonald's said it had fallen short. It promised a specialist unit, a new action plan, and industry-leading practices. The BBC went back in January 2025. Workers were still reporting the same things. The UK equality watchdog announced it would intervene again because the promises made in response to the original investigation had not translated into protection for the people working the fryers and the tills. The UK chief executive was summoned to Parliament. Twice. On the second occasion, he told MPs the chain was still receiving between 1 and 2 allegations of sexual harassment from workers every single week. McDonald's will continue to serve hundreds of millions of meals in Britain. The Happy Meals will keep going out across the counter. But 700 workers have put their names to legal claims saying they were not protected. Customers are paying attention to that number. 3. Starbucks. You are in the queue. You gave your name at the door, a name they will probably spell wrong, and now you are waiting for a drink that costs £4.50. You do it anyway, because Starbucks sells something beyond coffee. It sells the feeling of being a regular somewhere. In 2023, that feeling started curdling, and in the UK, Starbucks posted a 35 million loss. The boycott began with a tweet. Starbucks Workers United, the union representing thousands of baristas, posted a message of solidarity with Palestine in the early weeks of the Gaza conflict. Starbucks Corporation responded by suing its own union for reputational damage. The social media response was immediate and enormous. Customers who had never thought about where their latte money went suddenly started thinking very carefully. But in Britain, the boycott fed into something that had been building longer. Prices had risen. The warm, communal atmosphere Starbucks had always marketed was deteriorating as staffing was cut and automation increased. Customers who paid $5 for a coffee found they were paying premium prices for what amounted to a vending machine with better lighting. Starbucks UK blamed boycotts, cost of living pressures, and increased competition for its 35 million loss. The CEO, who had been in post for just 17 months, stepped down in September 2024. His replacement came from Chipotle, a brand that notably appears on this channel's list of chains actually getting it right. Starbucks has not collapsed, it is restructuring. But the people who used to call it their daily ritual have quietly found somewhere else to be. 4. Wetherspoons. The Neverspoons app exists. That is where we have to start. But let us explain exactly why someone sat down and built it. Tim Martin founded Wetherspoons in 1979. Over 800 venues, nearly 40,000 employees, a near ubiquitous presence on every British high street, cheap pints, cheap food, always open, no music, no fuss. But Tim Martin is not a quiet man. In the run-up to the 2016 Brexit referendum, Martin had 200,000 beer mats printed and distributed across his entire estate, urging customers to vote Leave. He published a pro-Brexit magazine with an estimated readership of 2 million and had it sent directly to households. He removed French champagne and German beer from the menu, not because customers asked him to, but to make a point. He appeared alongside Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson to campaign for withdrawal from the European Union. Staff groups pushed back. The employee campaign group Spoons Workers Against Brexit described the mass distribution of political material as dangerous propaganda. A petition demanded he stop using the pub estate to distribute political messaging, pay staff the real living wage, and recognise a union. Wetherspoons does not recognise a union. The Neverspoons app was built by a Remain voter who wanted to find his nearest alternative. It now has a significant user base of people who will go to any pub except one with a Wetherspoons sign above the door. They are not the majority of Wetherspoons customers, but they are a measurable, deliberate, ongoing act of consumer withdrawal. In November 2024, Martin said pub drinkers should expect prices to rise. He has since publicly backed Reform UK. The Neverspoons app continues to receive new downloads. 5. Papa John's. In 2021, Papa John's UK was profitable. Sales were over 102 million. More than 500 locations across the country. The third largest pizza delivery brand in Britain, with a delivery infrastructure built for a post-pandemic world where everyone was ordering from their sofa. By the end of 2024, 67 locations had closed. Pre-tax losses had reached 21.8 million, sales had dropped to 88.6 million, a fall of over £13 million in 3 years. Papa John's attributed the closures to geopolitical issues, staffing shortages, and rising costs. The customer explanation is slightly different. What happened is a story about the moment people did the mental arithmetic on a pizza delivery order and decided it did not add up. A standard Papa John's delivery, a large pizza, some sides, a drink, could comfortably reach £40 with platform fees and a tip. £40. For pizza assembled in a branch and driven to your door in an insulated bag. Customers who had started ordering during lockdown began asking in 2022 and 2023 whether this was actually what they wanted to spend their money on. The answer was increasingly no. Papa John's had raised prices to manage costs. But when you raise prices past the point where the product justifies them, customers do not complain. They just stop clicking. The app closes, the order does not get placed. And 12 months later, it shows up in the financial statements. The UK managing director said in January 2025 that the company is no longer losing money. Whether the customers who left during the contraction will come back is a question only the next set of accounts will answer. 6. Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut in the UK has been contracting for over a decade. But the pace of that contraction and the specific reasons customers give for leaving makes it more than just a brand in gradual decline. It is a brand that customers feel has been deliberately changed in ways that benefit the company at their expense. The sit-down Pizza Hut of the 1990s is largely gone from the British high street. The salad bar, the deep dish-pan pizza on a stand, the all-you-can-eat lunch that was genuinely one of the better value propositions in British food. Those restaurants have been closed, converted to delivery-only operations, or replaced by smaller express formats. The company has framed this as a response to changing consumer preferences. Customers who grew up with the original format frame it differently. They say the product that made them loyal was removed and they were given something worse and told to like it. The complaints across 5 years of social media are consistent, portions have shrunk, prices have risen, quality has declined, service has deteriorated. These are the classic markers of a brand that has decided to extract value from its customer base rather than deliver it. In 2024, Pizza Hut UK went through significant restructuring. The casual dining arm was placed into pre-pack administration, a process that allowed the company to shed debts while the brand continued trading. Customers who had loyalty accounts or prepaid vouchers found themselves holding documents that were no longer honoured. That experience, paying a brand, having it restructure and receiving nothing in return, does not generate return visits. 7. Café Rouge. Café Rouge is the restaurant chain you remember but perhaps have not been to in a while. The dark wood. The Parisian brasserie aesthetic. The steak frites and the crème brûlée, and the sense that you were doing something slightly sophisticated for not a great deal of money. It was never trying to be Michelin-starred. It was the grown-up alternative to fast food, aimed at families and couples who wanted a proper sit-down meal without a special occasion. It failed, gradually, then quickly. Café Rouge's parent company, the Casual Dining Group, went into administration in 2020. 91 restaurants closed immediately. The brand was rescued and relaunched with a reduced estate. But it never fully recovered, partly because the pandemic accelerated a shift in dining habits already underway, and partly because the chain had spent years making small decisions that eroded its value proposition without ever producing a moment of crisis dramatic enough to force change. The portions got smaller, the prices went up, the menu got shorter, the wines got cheaper without the prices reflecting that. None of this was announced. None of it was a scandal. It was a quiet, sustained series of adjustments that customers noticed individually, mentioned to each other, and eventually responded to by going somewhere else. The lesson of Café Rouge is not about one bad decision, it is about what happens when a brand silently decides its customers will not notice being given slightly less for slightly more year after year. They always notice. They just do not always say anything until it shows up in an empty restaurant on a Saturday night. 8. Byron Burger. Byron launched in London in 2007 with a clear proposition: proper burgers, real beef, proper chips. A grown-up burger restaurant with leather seats and a beer list and no clown mascot. In a market dominated by fast food chains, it felt like a genuine alternative. And for a few years, it was exactly that. Then, it grew too fast. And then, it did something a significant portion of its customer base has never forgiven. In 2016, Byron collaborated with the Home Office in a sting operation targeting undocumented workers on its own staff. The company invited workers to what was described as a routine compliance meeting, then allowed Home Office officials to be present. 53 people were arrested. Many had worked at Byron for years. Some had families, some had been there when the restaurant opened. The public reaction was swift and organised. Protests took place outside Byron restaurants across London. Customers who had eaten there regularly announced they would not return. Campaign groups organised. Some of the protesters were employees of other hospitality businesses who understood exactly what it meant for a company to hand its own workers over to immigration enforcement rather than handle the situation through proper legal channels. Byron went into administration in 2020. It was rescued and relaunched as a significantly smaller operation, fewer sites, a delivery-focused model, and a brand that carries the weight of 2016 for anyone who was paying attention. The burger is still good. The story of how the company treated the people who made those burgers is not one that washes off easily. 8 brands. 1 pattern. The customers always knew first. Before the profit warnings, before the parliamentary hearings, before the administrators moved in. They noticed, they talked, and they quietly stopped showing up. This channel will keep tracking where that money is going and where it is not. See you next time.